Back in the 1950s and 60s, freeways were all the rage. The great planners of America had just realized the viable and possible efficiency that came with a widespread system of highways, stretching city to city and even neighborhood to neighborhood. So then, as if they were drawing lines on a blank sheet of paper in a few minutes, they altered the entire history of urban areas. Neighborhoods were separated, destroyed, and downtowns became surrounded by walls of vehicle-focused paths. Using a more local example for me, looking at the Stadium Freeway in Milwaukee, the design was canceled, but if you look at the north end, you can imagine what it would have been if it was extended. Blocks upon blocks of homes would have been flattened, just so traffic can still suck on Brewers game days. So anyways, today I wanted to look at some of the worst designs ever proposed, because there are some absolutely terrible ones out there that are hard to even believe. Before that though, I wanted to very quickly ask if you would please consider subscribing to my channel. I make geography and highway content just like this every single week, so if you enjoy my stuff, subscribing would really help me out with channel growth. Thank you! So looking again at the interstate map of the entire US, there's an important name to learn here, and that's Robert Moses. See, Robert Moses was an urban planner and public official from New York who envisioned an absolutely massive map of freeways and parkways around New York. He had the idea for the Great Lakes Parkway between Rochester and Buffalo, which never ended up getting fully built, but he was also responsible for pretty much all the parkways in New York City, encouraging these highways to be built anywhere and everywhere. There was a problem with him though. This dude was a go-getter, but he was also very racist, so his ideas for highways oftentimes lacked real consideration of a large amount of the population. Either way, I personally dub him as the king of absolutely egregious freeway and interstate proposals, and you'll find that out soon. Anyway, our first example today is the Vieux Riverfront Expressway in New Orleans, Louisiana. The routing would go along the waterfront in New Orleans, straight from the Crescent City connection over to I-10 a bit farther north. Firstly, these waterfront highways have always been controversial, disconnecting the city from the water. But let's just think for a moment about what it would pass through. Convention Center, gone. British Plaza, gone. Spanish Plaza, gone. New Orleans Aquarium, gone. And then when it gets farther up, it gets really bad, as it goes directly through the beloved French Quarter. I don't know if you know the French Quarter, but it's one of the most iconic historic neighborhoods in the entire US, and its connection to the Mississippi riverfront is incredibly important. The freeway would likely replace this rail line, hurting public transportation, but it would also pass right by Jackson Square, Café du Monde, and probably destroy the French Quarter Riverwalk. This would immediately alter the neighborhood's feeling and vibe, and absolutely destroy significant history, also disconnecting the French Quarter from neighborhoods to the east. This was originally thought up in the 1960s as a downtown loop route, but what I think is especially funny about it is as I read about it, I found that the idea was thought up by who other than Robert Moses, who they hired from all the way up in New York to come down to their city and decide how to disconnect neighborhoods and displace minorities. I really think I could plan freeways better than this dude, especially if it's as simple as just drawing a line without looking at what's under it, telling yourself they'll just figure it out. Anyway, the idea turned into Interstate 310 when they were in need of funding, and they even built a small portion in 1964 as a 6-lane tunnel under Harrah's Casino. But it was eventually canceled due to local opposition. As we continue talking about the worst proposed freeways in American history, it's important to understand that the examples in this video are not objective. But in my media, I'm usually drawn towards objective content, which is why I really like Ground News, the sponsor of today's video. Ground News is a news comparison platform that helps you cut through the sensationalism and information overload by providing crucial context about each source's political leaning, reliability, and ownership. Let me show you how this works with a recent story. The ongoing heat waves across the Mediterranean are sparking intense wildfires. Here's a page titled Mediterranean Heatwave Fuels Persistent Wildfires in Greece, Turkey, and Syria. And when you look at it on Ground News, you immediately see the breadth of coverage with over 180 sources. You can compare headlines and understand how different languages might subtly shift your perception of the story. This side-to-side comparison empowers you to think critically and discern the full scope of what's happening. For articles like this, it's important to get the facts right, and Ground News shows the factuality rating of each source, which is calculated by getting the average of 2 trusted rating systems. They're even recognized by the Nobel Peace Center for their impact on media literacy, which is exactly why I use them. Ground News isn't about telling you what to think, it's about giving you the tools to see the complete media landscape. If you're looking for a better way to stay informed and understand the world beyond your usual newsfeed, you can get 40% off their Vantage plan for unlimited access by scanning the QR code on your screen or by visiting groundnews.com/beaver. Link is in the description below, give it a try and gain a more balanced and complete view of news. Next, we move to New York City, where our boy Robert Moses had the amazing idea to build a freeway right through Manhattan. Now, Manhattan has kept so much of its beauty by preserving the history and not tearing down buildings. Sure, FDR Drive is on the east coast of the island, and that's technically up to freeway standards, but it's fine besides that, with very little freeway infrastructure. But in 1959, he thought of the Lower Manhattan Expressway, which would come out from the Holland Tunnel and push right through Lower Manhattan, likely gutting the Soho neighborhood, among others. It would then connect to the Manhattan Bridge and the Williamsburg Bridge, creating a route that really nobody asked for. Moving back to Bob Moses, he was especially in charge of the tunnels and bridges in the city, so when he wanted them connected to each other, officials didn't fight back. So in that case, it had to be the citizens of New York. It was finally canceled due to citizen-led opposition 8 years later in 1967. And if you want to read more about Robert Moses, check out The Power Broker, a super long, kind of boring book. I read like a quarter of it and found it really interesting. Moving to Boston, Massachusetts, we have possibly our top competitor if the competition was wreaking as much havoc on historic cities as humanly possible. This time with the Boston Interloop Freeway. Look at this route. That's pretty bad, right? Boston has so much history and density in the interurban area, so sending a freeway right through areas that aren't industrial would suck. Well, let me add in a couple more that would stretch out from the Interloop. This would be absolutely detrimental. Now let me zoom in because it gets worse. In the south, it would follow Milnea Cass Boulevard and push through the Northeastern University campus, directly through. A bit farther north, I'm pretty sure it would pass directly by Fenway Park and hit up another college campus, this time Boston University, before passing over the Charles River. And what's on the other side, you ask? Oh, just MIT, which it would also push through. And unless there's a tunnel under the Charles River, they would have no other option but to elevate it through the campus. It then decides the only course of action is to make a line straight into downtown Cambridge, but at least it doesn't go through the Harvard campus, right? Right? Nah, they found a way by making a large interchange right here and a highway that probably goes literally right through the campus. I don't know what the thought was here and how they plan to pull this off, but I just can't get behind it personally. This genuinely almost got built, with everything being pretty much approved through the opposition until 1966, when the governor caved to protesters outside the state capitol building and ordered a restudy of the highway's route. It was then fully canceled in 1971, because how in the world would you even build it? Next, we get into a few that have less info, but are equally as insane. The first would be the Johnson Street Expressway or Isthmus Highway in Madison, Wisconsin. This basically comes from one blurry old picture, but there was a small proposal for a possible expressway into the Madison Isthmus, working its way around the Capitol, and I believe this ends up going along University Avenue, one of the most important routes in the city, meaning an expressway would pass right through the UW-Madison campus. I don't know what kind of weird obsession these highway planners have with passing through large campuses, but at least it didn't happen. Madison is fully unique as a city because of that isthmus where everything is centered around the Capitol building. A freeway or interstate here would be absolutely detrimental to that, ruining the vibe of the entire downtown region. Alright, next we move to Utah, who has been especially crazy with their infrastructure proposals. And in this case, a developer proposed to the city council 2 freeway-sized bridges over Utah Lake, connecting into Eagle Mountain. Now, Utah Lake isn't deep, and it's fully possible to build bridges over the lake potentially, but these are going to be like 7 miles, and there's mountains on the other side. It's not really entirely feasible, but that's what I love about Utah. The thought here is that the Wasatch Front is running out of easy room for suburban expansion, so Eagle Mountain would be the next place to start growing. This is totally valid. We've seen communities in the west like Harriman explode in population, so there's no worry expanding into the drier landscape. Eagle Mountain has grown by around 40,000 people in the last 20 years, and I don't doubt it'll continue exploding into places like Fairfield and Cedar Fort. Saratoga Springs will continue down the Utah Lake coast, so a connection in just the sense of traffic congestion might not be the worst idea. The thought of 2 immediately being built is a bit much, but I don't know if we'll find this as unbelievable 40 years from now as the Wasatch Front continues to explode in population. This one seems like it might just be the most realistic we have. That's it for my list though, and there's more where that came from. Something about the 50s and 60s just involved so much excitement around where they can build these new freeways. And since it's before we formed modern urban planning thoughts and a lot less racism, a lot of the plans just sucked. I'd love to hear of any other plans you know of so I can make another part to this, but until then, feel free to look into the terrible ideas I talked about today. Thanks for watching.